There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Nick Bhavsar. Nick is the Senior Vice President of Marketing at GetSmartContent. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm a huge fan. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast on my way too long commute for some time now.
I really appreciate that. You had mentioned that even before we jumped on today's episode, and it's fantastic that I think not only that our content is resonating with our listeners, but also that then we get to sort of re-engage our listeners on the show who are bringing their own unique flavor and expertise to the program. So, it's kind of coming full circle, and I love the fact that we get to do it. Today, we're actually going to be talking about this idea of moving from product centricity to persona centricity for B2B marketers. And I'm excited to dive into that topic. But before we get into that, Nick, maybe you can tell our listeners a little about what you and the GetSmartContent team are up to these days.
Sure. I joined GetSmartContent, a little over 11 months now. It was October last year. And part of the appeal was I was a revenue or demand marketer in my career for quite some time, and came across this struggle, really trying to engage prospects and provide the best relevant content so they'd engage, drive in top of funnel interest, and then move them throughout the funnel and actually drive to opportunities and ultimately to revenue. And it's a constant challenge that marketers are faced, and constantly trying to figure out how to best engage those prospects. And GetSmartContent has a really cool solution to help with that problem. And I thought, instead of just buying the solution, let me jump aboard and help run the team from a marketing perspective. And it's been an amazing 11 months, just coming up to it next month, and really looking forward to where we're heading. That's
fantastic. And you are certainly offering a very valuable solution to a very real problem. And, you're a senior vice president of marketing at, in a marketing business. So you're bringing an additional layer of expertise. You sort of are able to put your money where your mouth is and execute on some of the strategies that we're going to be talking about today. So again, moving from product centricity to persona centricity, especially for B2B marketers. Nick, kind of what is this idea? What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so early in my career, I was an engineer, and I sort of moved over to the dark side of marketing and technical marketing and product marketing. And when I did, I noticed that one of the things that companies were doing was they came up with these really interesting solutions. And for a while, for me, it was in the IT space, and they'd come up with these interesting products, and then they'd go tell the product marketing team and the demand gen team, hey, go push this stuff out, right? Go let folks know about it. We've got this amazing, new solution, this widget, better mousetrap type of thing, and go tell a bunch of folks about it and get some interest. And so we did, and we had some success with that. And I think, a lot of marketers that'll resonate with a lot of marketers. And then we sort of, fast forward a few years later, and we got into the content side of things and thinking about, well, what product or what problem are we helping to solve? How does this actually help solve that problem? And we started to pump out really good educational content. And, that's definitely a notch towards the customers a little bit more. But now we start really thinking about personas. And the best analogy I can give you is that, good salespeople do this instinctually, right? They have the human intuition that when they talk to a person, they immediately diagnose them. They figure out, is this somebody that's in my pipeline? Is this somebody that's not? Is this somebody that's junior, or is this somebody that's more senior? Is this somebody that is the first time I've ever talked to them? They've never heard of us. They don't have any idea about the product or solution space that we're in. And so therefore I have to do some education. And the core concept around this sort of persona approach or persona centricity is really trying to figure out a way to codify that experience that good salespeople do all the time when it comes to interacting with prospects. And the analogy is sort of taken all the way to the extreme is when someone shows up on your website, do you have that same methodology to really think about that intuition? What is this person actually here for? And I think all of us that are in the B2B space know the stats around how many B2B prospects it takes to actually land a deal. And the notion that we're taking is, how do you codify that in a way that when someone shows up to your website, you do recognize if they're junior versus senior. You do recognize if they are in pipeline or not in pipeline, or if for the account-based marketers out there, if they're in an account that we're engaged with and what level we're engaged with them on. And so that's the core center of this sort of thesis, is really understanding the personas of who's coming to your website is really a critical part in starting that whole process.
So, Nick, I think we've definitely touched then upon this problem. You had sent me an email before the episode talking about that marketers cannot be truly successful if their prospects and customers' key decision makers are unknown or anonymous web visitors. So we've honed in on the problem, but I assume, of course, since we've brought you onto the show, we're not going to be just talking about the problem. There's also a solution. What do we do to solve this issue?
Yeah, so GetSmartContent at its core, provides an analytics and personalization solution for those marketers. And the real epicenter of our technology is a underlying platform that we call the 360 persona technology. And all it is we take a bit of information from your website and redirect it to our software, and then it starts to de-anonymize, or as we like to say, identify that audience. So if you're looking at Google Analytics, you can see how much traffic you've got, what conversion points there are, but you don't really know who's coming to the website. And so similar to how a good salesperson sort of breaks this down, we break it down and codify who's coming to the website and how they're experiencing it into 5 big categories. So the first one is what we call firmographic. Is this an account that I've got on my account-based marketing list? What industries is this company from, or the person that's with this company? What industry are they in? And then the second one is much more about the individual demographic. So we've got some partnerships with some folks like LinkedIn where we can actually pull back your LinkedIn information and see, are you with, what role are you in? Are you more junior person? Are you more senior person? The third characteristic is offsite intent. So we've got a partnership with Bombora that's really cool and lets us see what type of content you've been consuming on other sites, including other media properties, using their really advanced intent technology, and start to get at, are you looking, for example, for virtualization solutions? The fourth attribute is on-site behavior. And so that starts to get at, is this the first time you came to the site? Have you been on the site for 90 seconds? All kinds of attributes related to your web experience and your web behavior. And then the final one is our marketing automation attribute. And essentially what that does is it lets us pull information about that prospect from your marketing automation directly itself. So for a lot of folks, that can be, is this person in pipeline? Have they downloaded a white paper? Have they viewed your last webinar? And so we take all that information, all 5 of those different data attributes, and then we can first provide a report in terms of who's actually coming to your site based off of all those attributes. And then the second part of that is we start to build a personalization strategy that says, how do you engage this person best? And that's what we call that 360 persona technology, is what are those individual personas, and then how do you want to engage them with personalization campaigns? And that, Jonathan, is a really cool part, because now marketers, similar to how a good salesperson, as soon as they meet this individual, can adjust their marketing programs depending on who's actually coming to the site.
Yeah. So Nick, let's dive in a little bit more about this idea of persona centricity. If you and your company have honed in, you've captured this information, you're really trying to personalize the marketing approach based on the persona and not just the service or the product. What are some things that our listeners can be doing? What are some things that they can take back to their team, or some strategies that they can be thinking about? Are there some highlights? I've also got a note here talking about successful revenue marketers, and they're leveraging personalization solutions to build live, detailed personas based on, data attributes. Kind of what does this all look like?
So a good example is, B2B marketers recognize this. A lot of times we'll talk through, what is your persona? And so they'll say, my business is data scientists. And I say, great. But then I ask them, okay, how many data showed up to your website last week? And they can throw you the sort of website traffic information, but what they struggle with is actually identifying how many data Dans showed up to the website versus CFOs that had to approve that purchase versus, an IT person that has to be involved in that buying committee as well. And that's where it really breaks down. And so for us, we really believe, building that out into an actual data persona that says, for us, we take all 5 of those attributes and say, okay, let's build out what Data Dan actually is. Let's use these attributes from, for example, LinkedIn that represent their role. Let's pull these attributes from some of our other data partners on the firmographic side to say, and they're a part of healthcare industry businesses. And then we can say, and we want them to have this experience the first time they come to the website versus this experience when they come to the website for the second time. And so ultimately, you build all that out into that digital persona, and then you start thinking about what are the experiences you want to take them to. And so this could be things, this is where it's really cool to be able to take the technology to the personalization side and say, well, let me swap out the homepage image with something, for example, that's healthcare solutions for data scientists looking to use our latest, if we're an AI company, our computing power. And so you start to be able to introduce a number of different tactics as it relates to the strategy of engaging that data scientist. And they can be all kinds of things. You could redirect them to an industry page. You could do a fly-in where you actually take them to an upcoming webinar that you have, and that's only sort of introduced to that specific persona. You can dynamically change the graphics or text on the page. There's a number of things that you can do to engage them. But ultimately, the epicenter again comes back to that 360 persona of really understanding who is it that I'm trying to engage and how do I identify them when they come to the website.
Yeah, and there was a point that we had made via email about recognizing the importance of engaging buyers in the active demand stage, and creating those personalization solutions to identify that persona, guide them to relevant content. Nick, are there any pieces of advice then in terms of, whether it's starting to think about how can I make this shift to persona centricity, or if I'm already thinking about it, ways to implement strategy? Do you have any pieces of advice then for our listeners who are interested in this concept?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were in the crowd when Terry Flaherty with Serious Decisions introduced the new demand waterfall, and it was really, the most fun part about that was I remember turning around and we took a great sort of a B2B selfie shot where we looked back at all the people that had their phones out taking a picture of the new waterfall. And one of the things that we saw that was really interesting was the introduction of both the target and the active demand stages. And specifically the active demand stage, being people who are actively pursuing and looking at at solutions in the market. And a lot of those folks are visiting your website. And the old stats of 95% of people that visit a website never actually fill out a form. That's describing that active stage. So kudos to Sirius for starting to recognize that that's a critical stage. And that's one of the ways that personalization can help significantly is being able to say, of those 95% of the folks that are coming to your website, how do you better engage them so they do fill out a form and engage? And in many cases, they never will, right? So oftentimes when I speak to clients, we'll ask them, how many CFOs came to your website last week? And they look around and they're like, I know I should know this, but I have no way to be able to tell that because they don't fill out forms. And that's oftentimes the truth, but they're almost always, the client that I'm speaking of directly here has, over a $75,000 purchase point. Well, a CFO is going to be involved when they see and have to approve that purchase. And I guarantee before they sign that purchase, they go to the website. Now, they're not going to fill out a form, but if you knew that a CFO was coming there to the site, then that's a very different persona than the Data Dan that we were talking about earlier. So I would argue that you probably want to take them to a non-gated asset where they can see the ROI and justification for purchasing that's very different. And so those are the types of things that, as we start to think through the active stage and ultimately what that buying committee looks like. And again, kudos to Sirius for being able to articulate this very well. I think they've advanced us past account-based marketing to a true sort of persona-centric approach for demand, which really articulates, what each of the individuals in that buying group actually need. And again, the irony of this is when we talk to salespeople about this, they instinctually do this. They know if I'm talking to the finance person, there's no way I'm going to put my free trial in front of this person, right?
Yeah.
So this is the fun part. Is marketers are simply just, in many cases here, catching up to the sales organization.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You hear more and more the lessons that I think sales can learn from marketing as, they start to almost create, their own original field generated sales content. And this is a fun example of, a lesson that marketing can take away from something that sales has been doing for years. So, Nick, I think this has been some fantastic content. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And speaking of our listeners, if any of them are interested in engaging you online, they want to know more about today's episode, they want to know more about what GetSmartContent is up to, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Sure. Well, first, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity. We love talking to marketers, B2B marketers, and you guys have a great platform to be able to engage them. The best way to reach us is our website, GetSmartContent.com. You can reach me on Twitter. It's Nick_Bhavsar, or on LinkedIn, Nick Bhavsar. And I'd love to just chat with you and just learn a little bit more about your challenges. One of the ways that we like to engage with folks is basically to give them a free audit of the actual audience that's coming to their website. And for a lot of businesses, personalization is not the right answer, but for many it is. And so if it's something that folks are interested in, we'd love to be able to help them out and give them that free audit for what personalization could potentially do and identify their audience.
That's fantastic. Well, Nick, thanks again so much for taking some time out of your schedule to join us today. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Jonathan. I really enjoyed it.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you'd like to connect with B2B executives from all over the world, make sure to join our private Facebook community. There are some incredible conversations happening inside this group. To join, visit b2bgrowthshow.com/FB.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.